The ivory towers of higher education are crumbling. Recently, the media has been rife with historic layoff, programs closing, encroachment of AI in education, low student enrollment, buyout packages, retirement packages, grade inflation, which has left many to wonder if and how can higher education survive this crisis. Of course, this is not the first crisis to affect higher education, but from my experience, this is the most serious one. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Shawnee Hardware and I'm a professor at a college in Canada. And I'm speaking on this topic based on my over 15 years in higher education, both as a student and a professor. I must admit, since November 2024, I have been on leave, so I would miss the effects of most of the issues that I've mentioned. But I'm very curious about the climate and culture that has arisen in the wake of these latest, hence me speaking on the topic. Throughout my years in higher education, both as a student and a professor, all of the bargaining negotiations have led to a strike or have ended in a near strike, which with the faculty, which includes mainly part-time staff advocating for better working conditions and better pay. Now, conversations around working conditions in higher educations are typically met with cynicism or with neutrality at best. This is because the teaching staff is typically regarded as well paid, which is partially true. But in the last decade, there has been increasing precarity amongst the staff in higher education, with more and more of them being part-time or contractual full-time. Some reports estimate that over 50% of the teaching staff in higher education are actually non-full-time. This means that they are underpaid, overworked, and without job security. And in many instances, they are given their teaching load, that is the courses that they should teach, just days before courses start, which leave them with limited time to prepare. Therefore, conversations about the privileged teaching staff in higher education needs further introspection. The growing precarity in higher education leads to more mental health concerns for the staff. Even full-time staff who have some level of job security have expressed or have been expressing greater concerns about the often repressive policies that gnaw away at their professional freedom and protections in the classroom. With the growing neoliberal policies and the rise in business-like practices in higher education that focus on student retention at all costs, the teaching staff is often left to bear the burden of the various shifts and currents in higher education. Again, I want to point your attention to the fact that most of the teaching staff are part-time with limited job security, and they're often left to bend over backwards to please students and administrators alike, leaving them feeling ever more burnt out and unprotected. And what of the students? Are they not important in this conversation? Yes, they are. And quite frankly, without the students, many of us, including myself, would not have a job. And with the various non-traditional means of earning money, as well as different ways of accessing information or obtaining knowledge, more and more students are feeling like they don't need to go to college or university, or some have expressed regrets for going to colleges and university. So we need a new culture in which there is a reciprocal exchange of accountability, where educators are supported to innovate their practices and pedagogy to meet the changing educational and professional demands that students have, while students are supported to fulfill their academic and professional goals. But students also need to be held accountable. There seems to be an era of free-for-all, where more and more students, not all, not most, but enough, and I can emphasize that, enough, believe they can beat the system by doing very little while obtaining a passing grade. And because they're treated as customers, they're often given the right and given the passing grade when they've done little work and when there's evidence, strong evidence, showing that they've done no work to obtain that grade. So where do we go from here? Can higher education be salvaged? I believe it can. But this will require an overall and ongoing conversations with various stakeholders in education, including faculty, students, administrators, industry professionals, and community members. These conversations need to be held separately in their various groups, but also collectively, so people can hear what others have to say. And the effective practices arising out of these conversations should be implemented. Oftentimes, it seems as if the voices that are trumpeted in terms of how higher education should be reformed tend to come from the funders, administrators, and industry professionals. It's prime time for the voices of the teaching staff and the students to weigh in this equation. These consultations and the implementations of the recommendations from these consultations should lead to the reshaping of the institution that actually solve problems in society and make a more valuable contribution to society. And I'm not saying that higher education does not do so now, but there needs to be more improvement in this regard. These recommendations should lead to program enhancement that actually educate students for the present and the future. They should also reduce the gap between theory and practice, where more and more departments are offering internship-like programs that can help students to get a job or build network that can easily lead to them getting jobs faster once they graduate. But this cannot be done unless there is more secure funding, non-condition attached funding from the government. And we know that in the past couple of years, the governments have been making less of an investment in higher education, which greatly contributes to the crisis we have now. More higher education administrators are forced to cut programs to provide less security for staff, and also to go to businesses and other funders who may not have the best interest in terms of higher education solving societal problems. So I'm calling on the government, requesting the government to provide more funding for more secure funding for higher education. And maybe these changes will lead to a smaller teaching staff, but they should lead to better improvement in the working condition, more security, and more support for the staff who are hired, and also a stronger emphasis on student voice. These changes in higher education need to happen now for there to be a strong possibility of rectifying the problems that currently plague higher education. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.